Hi, this is JG. Today we're going to be smoking a brisket using the Old Country Insulated Gravity Smoker. We're going to be cooking it at 250 for approximately the next 20 hours. So this brisket I have is a 19 pounder Costco Prime Packer, and it is a beast. We're going to get this trimmed up. I got it folded in half right now. We're going to get it trimmed up and see what we're looking at after. I'd imagine, based on how fatty these usually are, probably going to be trimming off probably about 4 pounds. But for seasoning, we're going to be using just straight Texas salt and pepper. We'll be using post oak for the wood. I'll get back to you as soon as I get this trimmed up. All right, I got the brisket trimmed up. We're looking probably about 3.5 pounds trimmed or so. A lot of hard fat. Usually I trim off some of the edge a little bit too. I like to keep about 1/4 of an inch of the fat cap over the flat, and I typically try to cut off as much of the fat on the point as I can. Usually when it renders down, I'm not a big fan of ultra rich beef in the point. If I don't do that for these Costco Prime briskets, it's a little too much for me. Of course, everybody's a little bit different, you know, so to each your own. Do what you like. That's what barbecue's all about. So for the seasoning, we're going to be doing half and half salt and pepper, keeping it simple. I'll be mixing up a 1/2 cup of each. Usually it does the trick for about a 15-ish pound brisket. We'll see what that looks like for this one. All right, got it mixed up. Usually what I like to do is just sprinkle it over the top, and I'll come back and pat it in. I'll throw a little bit more on the edges. All right, so fortunately it's a little bit too large to handle with a single hand, so I'll be cutting the video and throwing it in the smoker. And we got her in. She fits perfect. I got the point over on the hot side of the smoker, got her fat down. Try to protect it a little bit since the heat source is rising from the bottom. I have a water pan, putting the heat probe just off to the right, so it will read a little bit hotter than the left, but we're gonna keep an eye on her. I'll come back after it gets back up to temperature at that 250 mark. I'll put the probe into the brisket itself. This thing takes a little bit to come back up to temperature, so want to keep it as efficient as possible. It'll hold that 250 rock steady. I have the valve at approximately the 50, maybe 60% open mark. I did order a 1.5 inch adapter for my barbecue guru, so once I receive that, I'll be rocking with that one from this point forward. It should make heat up a lot quicker. It should also be able to recover temperature much easier after opening the door. I'll come back in a few minutes. All right, it's been about 3.5 hours since I threw the brisket on. One of the things that I'm noticing is that with this smoker, after it sits about the perfect temperature for about 3 hours, it kind of drops down a little bit. I noticed this during my burn-in. I believe I was using slightly damp charcoal. The charcoal that I have in the chute, today it is perfectly dry, fresh open bag, topped it off. So what I'm thinking is I'm gonna have to do the same thing I did during the burn-in. Is I have this Weber tool. It's approximately 26 inches or 24 inches. I'll put a link to it in my description. But Weber calls this the charcoal rake, I believe. And what I ended up having to do was opening up the firebox and shoving this in between the grate and sort of giving it a shift a little bit. So what's happening is the ash is compacting up against the grate itself, and it's sort of snuffing out the flame. I believe this can be solved by using a different charcoal. I have a lot of Kingsford Blue still. I've heard that Royal Oak is much more friendly when it comes to this type of thing. It doesn't stick together like Kingsford Blue does. So in a future video, I will be using a different charcoal. There's another video I watched probably about a week or two ago that was actually comparing the different charcoals, lump versus briquette, and how each of them performed, everything from intensity of temperature to how long the charcoal lasts. I'll put a link to that as well. I think that's going to influence what I use in this next smoke. But I'm going to show you what I'm looking at doing. Yep, looks like it's time for another piece of wood as well. So up here is what I'm talking about. Grabbing it, giving it a little shift, letting it fall down. Getting a little bit more airflow under there. And keep that closed for a second. Grab another piece of wood, throw it back on. Alright, it's about 3:30 in the morning. I was woken up to the alarm on the smoke going off. As I had feared, the ash had compacted and started to snuff out the flame. So the temperature had dropped below my 200-degree threshold. I used the same method as earlier. Took the charcoal rake, sort of shoved it around, shifted the grate, allow a little bit more airflow, and it's coming back up to temperature. One thing to note is that at one point over the last few hours, it reached 195 internal, and now it dropped down to 190.3. Let's see what we can do about trying to finish it off, bringing it back up to that 200. But I believe if everything were working correctly, this should have finished probably about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. So this will definitely add a little bit of time to it. I might pull it off when I wake up again at 6, just to save the brisket. But I guess that determines, or will be dependent upon what the internal temperature is at that point in time. Alright, it's about 6:30 in the morning. My alarm for the internal temperature did not go off. As you can see, it's still doing the same thing with the ambient temperature. So I'm going to pull it and throw it in the cooler and let it rest. Let's see what we're looking at. Oh yeah, she looks great. Alright, trying to balance a few things between work and showing this thing off. So, one of the things I noticed is after the smoke today, it's finally cooled down. I had grease actually running down the back rear leg, and after examining it, it looks like it's coming from between this outer shell and the bottom. So I just spent the last few minutes looking around for it, and what I've essentially found was that this interior is not as fully welded as I initially expected or thought it was. So upon initial glance, everything looks great. You have nice welds on the side of the firebox. So I was looking around the bottom trying to figure out where the grease was potentially coming from, and it looks like all along the bottom edge. You probably can't see it too well. It's not fully welded, so it's not completely enclosed. It's very difficult to see in this light, but I am suggesting at this point, if you pick up the smoker, one of the very first things you should do before your first burn-in, smoke, anything like that, is to take that high temperature rubber gasket material and line the inside of the bottom all the way around to seal it. I'm gonna go pick up some today and do that. I'll be cleaning this out, degreasing it as best as I can this afternoon. So I'm also toying around with what I can do to potentially make this more temperature stable across everything. And I saw that a full-sized hotel pan actually fits perfectly on the bottom. So I was using the small pan for water earlier, but I believe using a full-size hotel pan with water will definitely make it more stable. I might still put one up on the second shelf to act as a buffer between the firebox to the right and the rest of the chamber. I've started drafting up ideas to how to better correct the temperature distribution across it, but I think that'll be one step in the right direction. I'm also considering that I need to come back and fully weld the inside of the firebox. As you can see up here, right there on camera, that's actually a soot from the firebox that's coming up. So the top is not fully welded, but the side is. Now, I do understand that if it were fully welded, it might pop the welds. Maybe it's not making too large of an impact. I think one of the things I need to do is buy some sheet metal, probably the same gauge as what we have here, and cut it up. It'll be a plate, and I'm looking at an extension that covers from this corner all the way down, and drilling holes of varying diameters along the sides. Now, if you look at some of the Assassin smokers, I believe they have a single, I think 12-inch long chute that comes out of the firebox. I believe the dimensions are approximately 4 by 2 inches, 4 inches. 4 inches long at the outlet, 2 inches high, with varying diameter holes all the way across it. From the reviews I've seen, it's very temperature stable, and I think I'm going to have to apply the same engineering to this one. So I'm still getting that approximate 18-degree temperature difference from right to left, and I think I can bring that back down into the single digits by working out some type of tray to replace the original heat shield that this came with. That's all I have for now. We'll start cutting into the brisket probably in about the next hour. Our Costco Prime brisket's been resting for about the last 2.5 hours or so. It's about 9:45 in the morning. We'll cut this up, and I'm looking at making some brisket biscuits. Let's see what we're looking at. We got a nice bark on the outside. Chose not to wrap this first one to see where we're at. I usually wrap everything about that 140, 145 mark. Usually has a nice color. Wanted to see what this was capable of. Immediately, it feels like the point might be a little bit overdone on the edge. This was what was closest to the firebox here. And then our flat, yeah, on the top side. It's definitely a little overcooked as well. I think this might be the combination of the temperature as well as the feeding issues with the charcoal. But I'm gonna slice this up and come back in a second. So the top side of the brisket's definitely a little bit more done, a little bit more tough than the rest of it. But this inside cut, man, it just falls apart. This is a little on the dry side. Like I said, I think I think that's mostly due to my temperature issues, but the flavor's great. I definitely think wrapping it would be the way to go in the future. I think there's something to be said for salt and pepper and oak. Very, very good stuff. Now this point. Here's my jam right here. That piece of the point towards the center, that is excellent. It's rendered down the way I like it. Tons of flavor. Not too rich. Still just enough fat for all that flavor to come through. That's definitely an A+. All right, I'm gonna clean up real quick and give you some closing thoughts. All right, closing thoughts. Number one, I think that the temperature distribution across the right to left, I think it can be easily solved. It's not too concerning. It is consistent across all temperatures. Once you get it dialed into a specific temperature, the gradient actually drops. So I believe that to be as the result of the intensity of the fire itself, and it's fairly manageable. I noticed at one point I was approximately 12 degrees right to left, a little bit closer to my magical single digit. Number two, the casters on this, you definitely want to upgrade the casters, make it a little bit more maneuverable. Number three, it really doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it likes Kingsford Blue, so I will be trying Royal Oak in my next smoke. I want to see how that performs. It's really interesting. These were designed around briquettes, and the most common, most used Kingsford Blue kind of doesn't work as well as I thought it would. As I mentioned previously, it sort of compacts up against the grate itself, and it restricts airflow. Now, one thing that is somewhat interesting about that is after it cools down, all that ash from the coal actually falls down. So I'm not sure what's really going on. I think it's just the coal, not the smoker design itself. Next item, getting up to temperature kind of is a beast. It takes a little bit to recover once you open the door. And you definitely need to consider that rubber gasket material alongside the bottom to clean it out. And lastly, the brisket that just came off, I had it fat side down, thinking that the fat would protect it from the heat at the bottom. But in reality, it was the top that was more overdone. So the fat cap, the direction towards the greatest intensity of heat, was actually the most tender. So I think that's something to consider going forward. Definitely need to be wrapping the briskets, I think. I don't think it produced the best brisket I've ever made by far. That actually came off of the old country smokehouse I used to have. But as far as flavor, it was up there with the best of them. Well, that's all I have for this. Thanks for watching. Oh, and one last item. I did order a stand for my phone to be able to record things a little bit better. Definitely lacking on the quality side of the last few videos. It'll be a lot easier to record things, show you what I'm doing, and get you a little bit more involved in this smoker. Thanks again.